Joe Monday, Rick Hale, how are you?
I'm awesome. How are you, Brett?
Good. I bet you if they listen closely, they might actually catch us singing.
I've been known to mumble along louder in certain environments, like my car in the shower.
There you go. Uh, well, here, God, we're on number six of the six myth understandings out of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, and I've really enjoyed this little series of Mojo Mondays because it's really just kind of how we think, and sometimes we fall into these little traps or these myth understandings, but you got to learn your way through them, right?
Yeah, there's
I'll pop them up while you give me your take on it.
yeah, there's two stages of creation in this world, and the first, and people usually think creation happens in the manifested external world when really it starts in your head and your mind. So
Right.
I've enjoyed the conversation too, and all of these, when indoctrinated and committed to in your mind, that's step one towards a physical manifestation and ultimately an elevation of your success.
Absolutely. And we've all made the statement, I can't do it, or it can't be done in my market, or it would take too much time and effort. I would lose my freedom. It's too risky. I'll lose money. Or last week we did, my clients will only work with me. Only I can deliver quality service. And today we're going to go through having a goal and not fulfilling it is a negative thing. I'm going to bet, and I'll be transparent to say, I've had all those thoughts before. And it's not that we're ever immune to having a thought. The question is, how do we work ourselves in our minds and our hearts through those thoughts, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's the concept of failing forward too, that if you, the key to success in anything is having a parachute so that you don't beat yourself up to the extent it becomes debilitating. And so, the question is, if you don't hit a goal, is that a terrible thing? And the answer is it could be. Depends if it's non-negotiable and it's an absolute commitment, or are you striving for experience?
Sure.
And it's how you frame it up. But the silver lining in any failed experience is, what did you learn and what are you going to do differently? And when you couple those together, you're going to plus yourself on the next round and you get to swing again. It's not a one round fight, if you will.
Sure. Well, I think in corporate America, it takes on a different meaning than in self-employment or business world, right? Like in corporate America, it almost feels like that manager wants to use that goal as a consequence or some way of saying you're not good enough. Where in our world, goals are very necessary to keep us moving forward to live in a big life, right? And we got to be careful that we don't make that goal the stick that we beat ourselves up with because we don't always hit it, right? However, you use the word commitment, and I like that word as well, Rick, because I feel like in my mind, in my perspective, a goal and a commitment are two different things. Some people, they're the same thing, but I'd throw the analogy of like somebody might have a goal to run a marathon, but the person you see crawling across the finish line made a commitment to finish that marathon, right? And either way, it doesn't matter. It's their perspective. You just don't want it to be a negative experience.
Well, and you made a good point too, as a self-employed, salesperson, if you will, or manager of your own world and your own business. It compared to corporate America, somebody else may have an agenda attached to your goals inside of a corporate experience where you hitting your goal really fulfills their goal, which could be self-serving. The cool thing about our industry is when you set goals, we serve people and there's an outcome that's beneficial to the universe. It's not. So it depends on how you feel and how empowered you are about your goal in terms of how badly you should feel if you fall short. So that's my take on just the energy behind a goal. And if you're committed to serving people, the world's going to favor you and serve you people to help, take care of.
Sure. And, the other thing about goals that I'd like to get out there in the beginning of this conversation is we tend to use the framework of a calendar year or a 12-month framework. But a lot of times you and I have had conversations like, hey, what would it look like if we hit our goal in 9 months, right? Tell me about that.
would feel incredible,
Yeah,
obviously.
of course.
But what I've experienced coaching people is that when they take their goals and spread them out over 12 months, there's going to be a month somewhere that things just don't go well. A wheel falls off your car, not literally, but figuratively in your business. And then, you've got to play catch up. And it's hard to catch up fourth quarter if you're behind more than the prorated goal. Like, for instance, if your goal is to sell 24 houses and that's 2 a month, if you get behind a couple of months and you've now got to sell 4 extra houses in December, that's tough. But the idea or the concept is that if you could subdivide those goals into 9 months and then have fourth quarter as your catch-up month or your fallback, or maybe you just take 3 months off. I mean, what a cool idea that is. And so you put more pressure early so that you earn the right to coast if you need to, or you dial it up and it's not as pressure filled because you're not as far behind. And if you divide it
sauce or gravy, right?
That's it. And if you divide into 9 months, instead of 2 houses a month, you have to sell 2.66. I defy you to sell 0.66 of a house. So round up to 3 for the first 9 months, hit your goal, and then decide what you want with your fourth quarter. It's a pressure relief valve.
Yeah. I mean, it's like very few teams in sports world ever go 100% undefeated. Like that's the unicorn, right? But the important part is you need to win the Super Bowl or the national championship. It's like Georgia. They finished the season undefeated. But the question is, are they going to win the national championship, right? That's the prize.
That's right. And I would, I'm certain that they are goal oriented towards winning the prize, but they're committed to being their best. And sometimes if you fall short, there's a lesson. I do believe Georgia learned lessons playing Alabama in the SEC game. And I do believe they're going to be a better team, in a few weeks when they play Michigan. But ultimately you suit up, show up, do your best. And you've got to know that's what you did.
Yeah. Well, if you'd study into the great coaches, isn't that what John Wooden's whole message was? We're not counting scores. We're counting, did you give your best on the court?
That's it.
And that's really what this is about. The thing about goal setting, and Gary Keller really teaches us this, is the goal becomes that point on a map in the distance. It's the compass heading that says, hey, this is where we're going. Now I need to go back and create a path to get there. And along that path are the activities necessary to move me forward. So I almost have to forget the goal and focus on the path and the activities, and then hold myself highly accountable to activities. And if I don't hit my activities, maybe I could make a case that would be a negative thing, right?
Right. Well, now you've touched on the idea of leading and lagging indicators. And a lagging indicator is what a goal represents. It's the outcome. It's the finish line. Is did you hit it? Did you not? And if you didn't, what was the gap? A leading indicator would be all the steps along the way that would lead you to successfully landing near or past that goal. And when you focus on the activities, that's a controllable. You can't control. On December 31st, man, it's over. You closed it or you didn't, or January 1 when maybe you close on the last day of the year. And so really a healthy way to look at your business going into next year is to figure out the leading indicators to make sure you're pushing the right buttons that create a result. And then if those don't, you can make changes and amend your approach or double down on the number of touches and contacts and opportunities and make up for it, because maybe your conversion's off a little. And that's another conversation around skills.
But goal setting is such an important part of going big and thinking big and living a big life, right? And I always use the analogy of a dog racing track. Like the dogs chase that mechanical rabbit around the dog track, right? And there's some funny videos on YouTube, but if that dog ever catches that mechanical rabbit, it'll never run again.
Right.
So in a way, I could almost make a case to live our biggest life. Maybe we never need to hit our goals. Maybe our goals just need to be the mechanical rabbit that's just outside of where we're trying to go to keep us moving forward at our optimum pace, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt that the psychology of a highly successful person is that they're always striving and they're rarely satisfied with the outcome, because there's always room for improvement and betterment. And if that's your mentality, that's awesome. Really, the only negative cloud around goals that hurts people is when it becomes a defined moment that defines them. And so as long as failure doesn't define you other than a way to get better, then you're on the right path.
Absolutely. So what's too big of a goal to set? How do I know if it breaks? Like, am I going to break my business, or what's too big?
I mean, that's a personal conversation, Brett. But I do
Yeah.
think that with the use of the economic model inside of our business planning tool, where you can literally start with the amount of income you want and subdivide into the number of houses, the average sales price, the average commission, all the way down to the people in your database. I think at some point, can you handle the input or the leading indicator? And if it's an X number of contacts and X number of people added to your database, I think it's almost infinite if you're really hyper social and you're intentional. So
Yeah.
how do you know? Like if you pick a number and it scares you, but you can subdivide it into using the economic model into actual daily behavior, and that's palatable, then it's not too big. I mean, it's that simple. And it's not uncommon when people work through that. They start with like this, I want $500,000. And then they get all the way down and it's like, I need to have 3 quality conversations a day around real estate with people thinking of buying, selling, or investing. And that's not, for most people who are professionals and have been at this long enough with a reasonable social sphere, that's not it. You just have to do it every day. You can't do it 2 days a week and expect to get 5 days return. And so I think it's about that. And I think the other half of it is to analyze role models and people who are doing it around you. And if it's to be, kind of adopt the mentality, if it's to be, why not me? If you do what they do, you should get what they get if you use their, that have similar energy and approach. So those are the 2 ways I overcome it. And I'll tell you the other piece of it. And is thinking back about my son and how the cool thing about a goal is one day, you said this earlier, one day it becomes, the ceiling becomes your floor. And I'll let you expand on that in a minute. That kind of blew my mind. I was like, God, that's cool when your ceiling becomes your floor. And I started to process out. My son had that moment when he was a junior in high school. He was a high jumper. And I don't know, I have really short legs. He got my dad or his granddad's for long legs.
You got your top half, not your bottom half, huh?
Exactly right, man. I'm like a Porsche, very low to the ground. I have great center of gravity, but don't expect me to jump over a soapbox. Anyway, long story short, he did high jumping of all things. And at one point he hit 6'2" and 6 feet 2 inches. He's just right at 6'2" himself at the time, may not have even grown to 6'2" yet. And to be able to jump over your own physical height is amazing to me. And, they use the Pillsbury flop and there's a technique, but it didn't happen. He had to work for it. And he started at 5'0" and 5'2" and 5'8". And I remember coming home from a particular meet where he placed, I think he got second place. And he was so excited. He said, Dad, now that I've hit 6'2", I can never settle for anything less. And I remember as a father thinking, that's so cool. You've redefined your litmus for what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. And it's because you now recognize that rubber band and, your capacity has been stretched to the extent you now know it won't break. You've got more capacity. And to me, goal setting lends itself to the thinking of, how much can I stretch this rubber band, still have a really awesome life, but produce more because it's in my innate ability?
Yeah. And you brought up that term, and I'll just kind of elaborate, because that story you just shared is like a perfect story to prove the point. Is goal setting is such an important part of us getting better. And there's moments in our journey where our ceilings become our floor. And those are big moments. Those are breakthrough moments. And, we always joke, because everybody that walks in the door to get their real estate license, the number one, 99 out of 100 are going to tell the team leader, hey, I want to make $100,000 a year or $200,000 a year, whatever that number is. But in a way, they're saying, that's my ceiling. I'm looking up at that number. But at some point in time in the growth of many agents, that number becomes the floor. And then they go, hey, I better not make less than that number. But they forget at one point they were looking up at that number. Yeah. So to your son's story, he was looking up to 6'2", and then all of a sudden he realized in the car ride on the way home, hey, Dad, I now look down on that number. That's now my floor. And that's why goal setting is important, as long as it doesn't become a negative thing, right? Yeah. It's all about that going through life where you're looking up and turning out that ceiling becomes your floor.
Yeah, that's an awesome concept. And it also lends itself to giving yourself the credit due that you've accomplished things that you maybe never thought you could, that now becomes your floor. Give yourself full credit for still creating an impressive floor. Yeah. And I'll say this, there's one more twist to that story with Luke. He ended up, I think, peaked out about at 6'4". That was his highest jump ever. And he ended up tearing his Achilles on his, I think it was his left foot, because you launch on anyway. And he had to relearn his senior year. He couldn't jump on his left foot, and he had to switch feet, and jump the other way, which is almost, I would say that it's got to be close to playing tennis competitively with your right arm and then hurting your arm and having to switch hands and compete. He never hit 6'4" with the right foot, but he did make 6'2" again. And so I would say the moral of that story inside of all of our lives is circumstances happen, man. We have kids, you get married, you go through trauma, you have a physical, something shows up that you didn't expect that sets you back. The key is to figure out what is your bandwidth inside of that paradigm or that experience that still lands you in a space where you can look in the mirror, know that you gave your best, did your best, and that you're on a path of being your best.
Yeah. So I went digging and found a photo, Rick.
Oh, yeah.
You recognize that guy?
Yeah.
Tell me that story.
So I look at that and I still clinch up, to be honest. That's me going over about an 80+ foot jump on a dirt bike. And I didn't start dirt biking until I was in my mid-30s. And the funny part about that is I remember jumping my first 3-foot jump and I lost control of the dirt bike. It shot out. It's a powerful, powerful weapon. Shot out from under my legs. I couldn't hold it. I spun it. They call it whiskey throttle. I don't know what, because you can't control the throttle. And it wasn't pretty. And through role modeling, I made a really good friend at the track on my very first day. When I realized one guy had it figured out and the rest of us were struggling, I pulled him aside and said, man, can you show me? And he said, hey, let me pull you over. And I'm like, wait. I'm not ready to get pulled over big jumps. I need to tackle the 3-footer. And over the next couple of years, man, the guy kind of groomed and grew me, and I built confidence, 2 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet. And I believe that was my peak. I don't know that I probably won't jump 80-foot jumps anymore at this point in my life. But the cool thing about it's kind of like winning a Super Bowl. Once you've done it, you've done it. And then you can decide whether it's important to you anymore. But until I think the key to a regret-free life is to make sure you're jumping the biggest jumps you can while you can, and then later decide if that was important again and recalibrating your goals around priorities.
Right.
But thanks for bringing that up. I need to go ride my dirt bike, man.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so let's wrap this up. And what is the concept we want to leave everybody with? Like, I think I would leave everybody with, you're looking at your next year, you're looking at your next 6 months, your next 9 months. What's the number that you look up to and it's your ceiling, and you need to figure out a way to make it your floor? And I want to caution everybody, because the whole premise of this myth understanding is having a goal and not fulfilling it is a negative thing, right? That's the myth understanding. And if you're looking at something as your ceiling and your intention is to make it your floor, and it doesn't quite get there, keep going. It's not a negative thing. Keep going, because it started up here, and no matter what, you brought it down somewhere. It may not totally be your floor, but you brought it down about 10 stories.
Well, and repetition is your greatest teacher if you're applying the experience to your next experience. They call that gauged feedback, not just feedback. So when you gauge where you fell short and then you make subtle changes, at some point you're going to break through. And I think the secret to this is figure out what your ceiling is for this coming year, and then subdivide it into bite-sized pieces using the economic model so that it becomes a daily attack, not a monthly or quarterly, because that's hard to gauge and that's hard to determine. What should I do today if you had a 6-month goal from now? It's challenging. But if you said, what is my goal today? And as long as you're tracking your results each day, you'll make the necessary changes and shifts in approach so that the ultimate, landing pad becomes that goal that you set.
Yep. There you go.
And love yourself for trying, man. Love yourself for trying.
Absolutely. Rick Hale, Mojo Monday, my friend.